Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Anthony.
Good morning. Anthony, remind me who you are with. It's been a little while since I have been able to be physically on one of these meetings. So, and I think you were introduced, and I believe I was not present. So, if you would just kindly remind me who you are in your role, that would help a lot.
I'm just a fly on the wall. I have no business being here. Just kidding. I'm new with the city of Durham, and the role of senior project manager for the homeless team.
Okay.
So Lloyd's around the corner from me, and Colin, and the rest of the team here.
Okay. And it sounds like I probably need to add you onto the email list.
Please.
Okay, awesome. And then I'm Jonathan Crooms. I'm the current chair. I'm with Durham County Veterans Services.
Excellent.
So it's a pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure to meet you.
All right, I'm going to add you to the list. I'm just going to give it a few more minutes. We are down to a total of 7 members, so quorum is 4. So hopefully we'll have one more person join with us here, and that'll give us, and there we are, we hit quorum.
You're waiting, Jonathan. Would you review who the current members of the committee are?
Absolutely. So the current members are Angela Holmes, Renee Vaughn, myself, Shantae Addison, Angel Vic Holmes, Alicia Thompson, and Tracy Stone-Dino.
Thank you.
So we could use a few more. Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call us to order since we do have quorum. I'm Jonathan Crooms, current chair of the HSAC Performance Management Subcommittee. It has been a few meetings since I have been able to be with you in person, so I am delighted to be back and would love to take this moment to thank Tracy for sharing the past 2 meetings in my place. That was definitely a heavy lift, and she it was wonderful to take that on while I was away. So I can't thank her enough, and really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonathan. No problem. Couldn't feel your role totally, but was glad I could help out. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. First up today is the public comment period. Does any member or non-member wish to make a public comment? Okay. No public comment. Since I just asked Anthony to reintroduce himself to me, I'd love to have him go ahead and just reintroduce himself to the whole group again, since he is new. So Anthony, putting you on the spot, if you wouldn't mind doing your introduction again for everybody.
No worries. I am Anthony Henderson. I am the senior project manager with the homeless team for the city of Durham. So I work closely with Lloyd and Colin. And some of you I know I've been in more than one meeting with at this point, but glad to meet you all. And if I am meeting you for the first time, very nice to meet you, and I look forward to working with you. This is my 4th week with the city, so I'm still the newest kid on the block. So I look forward to hearing and learning from each of you.
Terrific. Welcome aboard, and we all look forward to working with you. So
Thank you,
glad
Jonathan.
to have you on this team. The next agenda item are the approval of the June 23 meeting minutes, which I sent out yesterday. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at those?
Jonathan and staff, I want to recommend a amendment on the minutes to number 6 at the top of page 2.
Okay.
It currently reads finalized scorecard for new project applications for the 2023 COC competition. CDD member Lloyd Schneider requested that this item be tabled until a future member.
Oh, that should be future meeting.
Right, and could be clarified to say until the June meeting of the HSAC.
Oh, got you. To the June meeting of the HSAC. Okay.
Right, and at which the HSAC would approve a funding priority.
Okay, got you. I will definitely amend that and appreciate that.
I'm noticing now in number 7 in the last line, Renee Bond needs an N on their last name.
I sure do. I did these a little more quickly than I normally do. So thank you for catching that. Okay, perfect. Can fix that. Any other amendments? Okay. If no further amendments, if somebody would like to make a motion to adopt the minutes, I would be happy to entertain them.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes.
Okay.
Angela Holmes.
All right.
Okay, and I'll second it, Jonathan.
Okay, second from Tracy. Any further discussion? All right, if you will just go ahead and put your vote in the chat box. Motion to approve minutes. Okay, perfect. All right, minutes are approved. Thank you, everybody. The next agenda item are an update on the 3 scoring competitions. The committee's been hard at work scoring applications, and we're just sort of at the beginning in many ways. So I'll turn this over to you, Lloyd, and you give us an update on all 3 scoring processes.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone. Lloyd Schmeidler with Community Development. Let me start with state's Emergency Solutions Grant, ESG funding. The state opened its competition on June 6th, I believe, with their request for proposals. The deadline for the submission of project applications and the regional application is August 21st. So the timeline is coming to a close. We conducted, as we're required to by the state, conducted a local competition that closed on July 11th. Project applications were to be submitted to the state using the state's Smart Sheets secure website. We received 2 applications, one from Housing for New Hope and a second from the A&P Smith Community Development Corporation. The subcommittee, evaluation subcommittee of Jonathan, Renee, and Tracy evaluated those proposals or applications and agreed to recommend to the HSAC that that all of the funds which had been applied for by Housing for New Hope, recommending that all of the $171,875 dollars would be divided equally for street outreach and rapid rehousing for the target priority population of unsheltered homeless families. Housing for New Hope did apply for the entire amount, and the scoring committee is recommending to the HSAC that all of those funds be awarded to Housing for New Hope. We sent out a request for an email vote from the HSAC. I think we sent it out Tuesday, and it is to the HSAC is to submit votes by the end of the day today. Melissa, might you have any update on how many votes may have been submitted by now?
So far, we've received a total of 11 votes from the HSAC.
And how many votes do we need to satisfy our quorum?
We need 13, so we still need 2 more votes. I'll send a reminder after this meeting, just as like a final attempt to get everyone to submit their votes.
Okay. Any questions about state ESG before we move on? Okay. Hearing none, I'll move on to the city's request for proposals for public services using CDBG, ESG, entitlement ESG funds, and City of Durham dedicated housing funds. We opened a competition earlier in the spring, actually, and the deadline for submitting applications, I believe, was June 9th. We were using a new software called neighborlysoftware.com. We had the funding sources, just again by way of review. We have $300,000 annually from Community Development Block Grant Funds or CDBG, $200,000 of City of Durham dedicated housing funds that is available for rapid rehousing, and approximately $168,000 annually of city entitlement ESG funds. The RFP is for the 3-year period of calendar years 2024, 2025, and 2026. So we envision, the department envisions having 3-year contracts for those 3 years. ESG funds may be amended slightly based on the entitlement award that HUD provides annually to the city. CDBG funds can be used for case management in emergency shelter or case management for permanent supportive housing projects. the ESG and dedicated housing funds are available only for rapid rehousing opportunities, and proposals must plan to use both a combination of the ESG funds and the dedicated housing fund. We received 4 applications, or 4 proposals, I should say, I'm sorry, from Project Access of Durham County to do rapid rehousing. Families Moving Forward applied for CDBG funds for case management and shelter, as well as using dedicated housing funds for rapid rehousing. Housing for New Hope applied for really all 3 funding sources, using CDBG for case management and permanent supportive housing, as well as using ESG and rapid and DHF funds for rapid rehousing. And Urban Ministries applied for using CDBG funds for case management. Families Moving Forward in its proposal did not indicate that it was intending to use ESG funds for rapid rehousing, and that was a requirement. So at this point, the city is not intending to fund Families Moving Forward for rapid rehousing activities. The scoring committee of Jonathan, Renee, and Tracy evaluated their project, the proposals as well in Neighborly. Going off in inopportune times. And I'll share the scoring averages. Project Access received an average percentage of 85.4% of available points. Families Moving Forward an average of 75.2%. Housing for New Hope's application 86.5%, and Urban Ministries an average of 87.7% of available points. Based on those percentages, we have submitted a proposal for funding. The department really is still in the process of considering the funding distribution. We did have competition for all 3 sources of funds, and so we're not going to be able to fund all of the projects to the level that was requested, but exactly how the department decides to divide up the funds among the 4 proposals is still has not been decided. After the department releases its funding recommendations, there will be an opportunity for proposals to appeal per the city's appeals process for procurement. City Council makes final decisions on how these funds are distributed. Any questions about that information?
I do. I know, since I believe this was moved to a 3-year funding cycle a few years ago, and so we do this once every 3 years. Remind me what the time frame is. I mean, I know these are city funds. You all have got to make decisions within the department, offer the opportunity to appeal, and then I assume, like you said, City Council would have to approve it in one of their meetings. What's the time frame look like for all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We still are working to get everything finalized with contracts in place by the end of calendar year 2023 for contracts that would cover calendar years 2024, 2025, and 2026. So I think we're I've been trying to work with department leadership to get decisions, funding recommendations made, so that we can at least open up the appeals window if any of the proposals wish to appeal funding recommendations before we move forward. I believe the process after the appeals period ends would be that the department develops proposed contracts, and then the contracts are forwarded to the city council for their final review and approval process. So we hope to get everything completed by the end of calendar year 2023.
Okay, thanks, Lloyd. We got a question from Tracy.
Hey, Lloyd, you said that the city council will vote on this. Will staff from the community development department have to make a presentation on this, or do you know whether or not this will be something that may be on the consent agenda for council to consider when you're presenting this information? I'm just trying to, I think, gather whether or not, because I realize this meeting is recorded, but will the overall process and the scoring be made public as well as a part of a presentation to council?
Certainly the individual scorecards would not be released by name. We may need to release scorecards anonymously. I don't know that specifically. My understanding at this point is the department leadership, at the director, assistant director, and Colin as our homeless team manager has been working directly with the city council. My understanding would be that there will be a presentation to city council about the proposed contracts, probably in a work session on a Thursday, and then approval of the contracts would be more than likely included on the consent agenda of a Monday evening ordinary city council meeting. That's my understanding. Thank you. Good question.
Other questions? Okay, well, Lloyd, if you want to move on to the COC funding competition.
All right, so the COC funding competition, we are in the midst of it. HUD released this year's notice of funding opportunity on July 5th. We established a local deadline for the local competition of next Friday, August 18th. We are using, again, a different software than Neighborly software, but zoomgrants.com has a secure website we've used for several years in the department for some RFP processes, and we're using it again for the COC competition. Durham, just in terms of the funding availability, our annual renewal demand, which is the total amount of money that's needed to fund, to fully fund all of the projects that were awarded funds in 2022, would be $1,886,565. This year, HUD is making the competition even steeper than it was last year, in that it has established that Tier 1 funding is 93% of the annual renewal demand, which equates to $1,754,505. So that's approximately $132,000 of annual renewal demand that's going to be in Tier 2. Those of you who may be familiar with the COC competition understand that Tier 2 funding is less certain, more problematic to obtain Tier 2 funding than Tier 1 funding. In addition, we are eligible to apply for a continuum of care bonus of $149,253 and a domestic violence bonus of $213,219. HUD is also increasing the COC planning grant amount to 5% of what's called the preliminary pro rata need. That amounts to $106,610. The planning grant is used by the department to help fund, largely help fund the COC lead agency staff or the homelessness team in the department, which now with Anthony's addition is up to 7 people, 7 staff. So in total, the Durham Continuum of Care this year is eligible to apply for $2,249,037 in the COC competition. We don't expect necessarily to get all of that funded, but we're working to create a strong collaborative application, stronger than last year. We did not score as strong as we would have liked to in last year's competition. The deadline for, again, local applications is August 18th. We'll be working with the scoring committee of Jonathan, Renee, and I'm losing a blank on who the third person on that scoring committee is.
Yes, our third person, and her name is escaping me as well. She's a former member, Danielle Butler.
There you go. Thank you, Danielle Butler. So we'll be working between August 21st and the end of August to get the project application scored using the renewal application, the renewal scorecard, and for renewal applications, and the new project scorecard for hopefully several new project applications as well, and getting recommendations through performance management and the Homeless Services Advisory Committee in early September, so that we can meet the September 28th deadline for the submission of the collaborative application, the specific project applications that are recommended for funding, and our priority list and the tiering and rankings in the priority list to HUD by their September 28th deadline. Any questions about any of that process?
I do have a question. As I recall from last year, when we were at the beginning of the process and applications were starting to come in, as I recall, there wasn't enough requests to fill all of tier 1, which we're pretty much guaranteed to get, right? Tier 2 is a little less certain. From what you and your colleagues have seen, do we think this might be an issue again this year where we need to encourage folks to apply?
Well, we have been working, it's a great question. We have been working with providers to solicit applications. One thing that's different this year compared to last year is that we're not intending to reallocate any existing projects. Last year, you'll recall, we reallocated the Home Again project and the Durham Crisis Response Center's Rapid Rehousing project. This year, as far as we understand, all of the renewing projects are intending to renew. So the only new funding that we'll have available for new projects would be the COC bonus and the DB bonus. We believe that we're going to have applications for both of those funding sources, but that remains to be seen. I think sometimes organizations think that since projects are more than likely going to be ranked in tier 2, the organizational effort to apply to submit an application for these funds is not necessarily worth the effort. They're not as likely to be funded as a tier 1 project, but we hope to get applications for all of the funds that are available to Durham.
Excellent.
I did receive an email this morning suggesting that one new organization is going to be applying for the COC bonus, and we trust that will happen.
Thank you, Lloyd. Other questions? All right, Tracy's got a question.
Yes, Tracy. You're still muted, Tracy. No, this is going on camera.
I think when you're working with a couple of screens, you're just like, do this to do this. Okay. I was just inquiring about, there used to be an organization in Durham, and I'm wondering whether or not they are still involved in, as a provider, either service provider or housing. Is it Durham Cares? Do they still exist?
Well, there's two organizations. There is an organization called Durham Cares, which has not been connected to the continuum of care. I need to review exactly what their, what activities they're involved in, what programs they're doing. You also may be thinking of Healing with Care, which is has their campus at 214 Broadway, which is right around the corner from the department's offices at 516 Reedsby Avenue. Healing with Care does still exist. I know they still do some programming. I believe they have a food pantry, and they have I think a dental clinic or medical clinic on site that provides free or low cost dental care to low income people in the community. That's what I know about them. They're no longer, at one time they had grant and per diem VA, grant and per diem funds to operate 9 beds of, I think, transitional housing for veterans. They closed that program several years ago.
Okay. And also, I know over the years we brought them up because this organization I'm about to mention, but I know, I think there was an unwillingness, I think, to kind of cooperate with, HMIS and complying with that. But is it the Durham Rescue Mission? Has the city kind of thought about approaching them or trying to, pique their interest in terms of being more involved in the continuum of housing? Because I know they do provide shelter care. I know Urban Ministries as well, but over the years, has the city thought about, maybe broaching a conversation with them about being more involved with the COC? I know it's been ongoing and they haven't in years past, and I don't know what roadblocks there are.
Yeah, our team recently had a conversation about reaching out to the Durham Rescue Mission again to see what opportunities there may be for collaboration and participation with the COC. Our current understanding continues to be that the rescue mission, while it serves many people who are experiencing homelessness, all of their beds, or none of their beds really, are dedicated for use by people experiencing homelessness, so their beds cannot be included in our housing inventory, which specifically focuses on beds that are dedicated for use by homeless people. When we were having discussions with them in the 2012 to 2016 period, we were trying to suggest that the rescue mission dedicate a certain number of their beds or a certain portion of their beds to serve only homeless people. They were unwilling to make that kind of determination at that time. Now, they have had some changes in executive leadership since then, and I think there may be some opportunities to have further dialogue with them in the perhaps over the year or so.
Okay, yeah, because I know early on when I started with the Alliance, there were concerns on, one, their compliance to gather information and data in HMIS, but also they are practicing housing first, but also I think they have a different philosophy, if not practice, around service engagement and connecting people to mental and behavioral health concerns, if not, working with other providers to connect them with maybe SSI or SSDI benefits. So I knew there were some challenges with that, but I just,
Right.
given their size, I didn't know whether or not there was any attempt to kind of try to engage them at this point with any of the, because we've had the housing authority do it with their grants. So I know there are funds available, but didn't know whether or not there was any opportunity to engage them in the conversation to apply.
Very good. I see Renee has her hand up.
Yep, Renee, floor is yours for your question or comment.
I wasn't sure if you could hear me, but I was wondering, what is the scoring instrument that we're going to be using? Is it connected with Zoom grants? And will there be training for that?
We will have an orientation for the, thanks for that reminder, Renee. We will have an orientation for the scoring cards. Much of the scoring that's subjective is handled by the scoring committee. The more objective portions of the scorecards, especially for the renewal scorecard, is handled by lead agency staff, and we review the scores of those with the scoring committee as we meet. So we can, I'll get the 2 scorecards out to the scoring committee after this meeting, and we can get an orientation scheduled in the near future. Thanks for that reminder.
And also, I'm, as you know, new to this process, but you were talking about the different agencies that could possibly submit applications. Is there a process that we use to encourage those that may be thinking about it, but not sure of the process or need some assistance in getting there?
Well, we do a variety of things, I would say. I mean, we publicize the availability of the opportunity as widely as we can through the department's channels, through the continuum of care leadership. We conducted a webinar meeting on July 24th, in which we reviewed the funding amounts available, as well as the application process and the requirements of the application. We have provided some technical guidance. I added the information to the Zoom Grants website that organizations will use to submit applications. I added the HUD's detailed instructions for using eSnaps, which is HUD's online secure portal for submitting COC applications to HUD, so that hopefully that's a little more accessible to the applicants. So and I've had some, and we did reach out to some providers, some organizations, to inquire whether they're planning to apply for these funds, and so we continue to work to solicit applications, but making them available to the community. I know I've had conversations with at least two organizations that are not currently funded with COC funds.
Sounds good.
Thank you for the question. Before we move off this, Jonathan, I do want to highlight for the committee's awareness as we move past this process, that the collaborative application has a couple of new questions on it this year, specifically about Housing First implementation. And one thing to keep in mind as we think about moving into 2024 is that it specifically asks for us to upload an attachment of a Housing First evaluation of one of our projects. So HUD does expect us to evaluate Housing First implementation annually. And so we know we did think what will serve us well in 2023 is we did a cross COC housing first evaluation process in the first quarter of this year. We need to make decisions perhaps jointly with our partners in Orange and Wake counties as whether we want to do something similar in 2024 to meet HUD's requirements for housing first evaluation, or do something different in the Durham COC.
So are we, and forgive me, I was scribbling while I was listening as well. So are we going to be, as far as this year's collaborative application, are we okay with those new questions? Do we have?
I think we're going to be okay. We're gonna have some written documentation of the process that we used in the first quarter of this year, and we'll certainly be describing that. And I believe that's going to help make our application stronger than it would be otherwise.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you, Lloyd, for your presentation and for answering questions. And special thanks to Tracy and Renee for being on the first two scoring panels. I know it's hard work, and we really appreciate the time that you put into giving each of these candidate organizations and their projects considerations. So thank you so much for your work. All right, our next item is outcome reportings from our HSAC approved performance measures from Melissa. So Melissa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jonathan. In March of 2022, the Durham Continuum of Care Board of the Homeless Services Advisory Committee adopted performance measures and benchmarks for our various project types. So that included street outreach, emergency shelter for families, emergency shelters for adults, unaccompanied by children, and then transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. I have been working with a number of our providers trying to acquire performance data so that I could report it back to our committee, with the ultimate goal of being able to publicly display this data on the Durham Continuum of Care website. Let me share this. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Perfect. These are the providers that we have been requesting data from. As you can see here, there are still several providers who we have not received data from. So I wanted to ensure that we listed those and that we discuss processes moving forward. But I will go ahead and report on the data that we have received thus far. And I'm very grateful for the providers who have already submitted their data. So that would be Housing for New Hope, Open Table Ministry, Project Access of Durham, and Urban Ministries of Durham as well. All of those providers have submitted their performance data. And then they've also contacted me for corrections, and we've worked together on correcting data if it wasn't reported correctly on the smart sheet. These other providers, however, have not submitted their data. I've highlighted the Durham Crisis Response Center because they have reached out to get technical assistance. I have attempted to provide that technical assistance to get them to submit their data, but we still have not received the actual forms of their data submissions. So I do have to include them on the missing data section. That being said, given that some of these providers specifically would be reporting on transitional housing projects, we do not currently have any transitional housing data that we can report on. And then permanent supportive housing, we also did not receive any data for any of our permanent supportive housing projects. However, I can at the very least start with our street outreach projects. Moving from the the last round of data collection to this one, the system seems to be performing well above our benchmarks for street outreach projects. So that was definitely something nice to see, that there was an improvement from the last round of data to this round. I have gone ahead and highlighted in green the projects that met the benchmark for each of the measures that we've been asking for. And then I've also noted each of the measures under as well, so that they can easily be notated. I can also share this after the meeting with the full performance management committee. That way, if anyone would like to review the data separately, I'll share the Excel sheet that I've been working on to collect this data as well. But in terms of like contacts who engage with our projects, we're looking for a benchmark of 60% or more. And as a system, we were performing at a 72% rate, that's good. And then for exits to positive housing destinations, we are performing at a 61% as a system, and our benchmark was 50. So that was also a positive for our street outreach projects. For total income increase or maintained, this seems to be an area that's been a little bit more difficult to get data on. Specifically, some of our providers have issues being able to pull the data from their APRs. So I think this is something that I'm thinking of redoing the training that we've done in the past for our smart sheet, just so that it's a little clearer on how providers are expected to pull data from the APRs into the smart sheets. And hopefully that will help mitigate some of the concerns about needing technical assistance for the performance reporting. But after submitting suggestions, we are performing as a system at 44%, which is above the 40% benchmark. And then for health insurance coverage, so this is specifically, we're asking providers to let us know of the people that they serve, how many of them have one or more health coverage options or health benefits. And we were performing at a 49% for the system for street outreach. So that's well above the 40% benchmark as well. For our emergency shelter projects, I will note that at the very end, we'll be able to see some trends with emergency shelter. As you can see, our emergency shelter projects are not performing as well, at least with the last round of data collection. For exits to positive housing destinations, the benchmark is 35%, and as a system, we were at 33%. The average length of stay in days as well, our benchmark is 60 days or less, and as a system, we were on an average 70 days of length of stay in emergency shelter. And then in terms of increasing or maintaining income, our benchmark is 60%, and we performed at a 51% for our system performance. So we'll definitely want to talk a little bit more. I know Lloyd and I probably have to have some more conversations about how we interpret this data and see what other trends we can notice from here. For our emergency shelter projects with families, we saw similar trends where our exits to positive housing destinations were lower once again. So as a system, we were at a 37% of our leavers who were exiting to positive housing destinations, and our benchmark is 65%. So that was definitely well below what we were aiming for. Average length of stay in days, we did see something positive there. So the average length of stay is supposed to be 90 days or less for families. And we were at 86. So we were just below, what that benchmark is looking for, which is good. And then for increase of income or maintaining of income, we were at a 55%, which is once again below what our 60% benchmark would have been for that measure. Now, a note for emergency shelter, some of the things that our providers had mentioned during this data reporting process was that they noticed that there were more landlords that were rejecting their clients, right? So there were a lot of clients who did qualify for vouchers or for assistance, but they had issues getting clients housed because there were just less landlords who were willing to engage with their clients. So that is just one quick note about some of the things that we're seeing with emergency shelter is that the reason why we're seeing an increase in the number of days that they're staying in shelter is because there's been just a harder time getting clients housed in general. So I do notice that at the very least with those trends. With rapid rehousing, we did see some positive and negative outcomes for this reporting period. So in terms of exits to positive housing destination, as a system, we performed at 95%. So every single one of the projects that did report their data, every single one of them met the benchmark of 80%, which is really good to see. That is definitely an improvement from the last data reporting period. We did not have all of our projects have above 80% for the exit to positive housing destinations in the last reporting period. So this is definitely a great improvement. For total income maintained or increased, this was lower from the last reporting period. We were at a 57% as a system, and the benchmark is 80%. This is consistent with all of the other projects that we've talked about so far. It seems like as a system, we've been struggling with maintaining or increasing our clients' income. And again, I think that this is specifically a performance measure that we consistently talk about as a performance management committee. Our providers have had several questions about how we report this data and how we analyze it. So I'm pretty sure there's going to be additional conversation around how we are reporting income increased or maintained. For the length of participation before move-in, we also saw some decreases or negative trends here as well. So we're at a 65-day average for length of participation before move-in, and the benchmark is to be 60 days or less. So this is also pretty consistent with other trends. We're seeing clients who are staying in projects longer than what we're working towards for our benchmark. And then on another positive note for rapid rehousing, for health insurance coverage, we did see an increase from the last reporting period for rapid rehousing. So as a system, we're at 89%, and the benchmark is only 75%. I will note that Housing for New Hope, I don't know if Ricky's here, but we will have to talk at some point about data, just because, it's not possible to get above 100%. So we'll have to talk about that. I'm pretty sure there's an error in HMIS. The numbers that were reported for the numerator and denominator for that measure were reported correctly based on what was in the APR. But that would suggest that there's some data missing from the HMIS. So the good thing about doing these system performance measure reporting on a regular basis is that it helps us catch things like this. So if there are inconsistencies in the HMIS data, this allows us to see them, before we have like an annual assessment for the entire project. So this will be good, and I will reach out to Ricky and Housing for New Hope separately to work on cleaning up some of their data on the back end. Are there any questions? I know there were a lot of numbers talked about, and so I'm happy to answer what I can.
Melissa, I think one of the things that I also heard, Lloyd and Melissa, please correct me if I'm wrong, from the conversation where we talked about landlords, was that these income numbers have sort of a more direct correlation to clients being able to qualify for units and therefore not qualifying. So for example, many of the clients don't have the income levels that they could qualify for a particular rental. So it's not like, landlords are just refusing sort of to work with our clients. It's more so that the criteria is more strict around income. And therefore, at least I can see a correlation between what this report says and what we've heard in terms of the landlords.
That's exactly right, Anthony. That's exactly what I'm thinking as well. Even when I spoke to families moving forward about some of the trends that they're seeing in their emergency shelters, that's what they were saying, right? Is that a lot of clients are just having trouble qualifying for a lot of properties. So it's not necessarily that there aren't housing options out there. It's just much harder to get their clients approved. The income is definitely a major barrier because most properties are requiring that, that they make 3 times more than what the rent is. And with rising cost of living, that's becoming an increasing problem that we're seeing.
Okay. So we've got 3 hands up. I think Tracy was first, and then I think Lloyd, and then Shante. So Tracy, go ahead.
Okay, just a quick question, and I'll follow up with you too, Melissa, regarding some of our missing data as it relates to that. But I also wondered whether or not there was a narrative that kind of went along with the analysis for some of the data, because we can't control for the supply and demand of housing, and also the housing barriers in which some of the individuals we're assisting may have. I know we're all trying to practice housing first, but we also, it's a lot more complex than that, because we do deal with individuals who have a lot of housing barriers and also carry a lot of debt from former evictions, if not other things that need to be mitigated in order to get them into housing. So I'm just wondering whether or not that's complicated some of the individuals from exiting into permanent housing and or keeping them from kind of moving into housing to be more stable.
Thank you, Tracy. I think it's a combination of all of those things. And I think that's what, regular analysis of our performance data is important for, because first we want to see like what trends we're seeing with some of the performance. And then if there are specific barriers that providers are facing, that's like keeping them from being able to hit these benchmarks, then I think that these are conversations that we need to have with providers so that we can strategize as a system to see how we can, do better. How can we work with landlords more? What strategies are other providers using to help their clients increase their income, that sort of thing. So a lot of this data reporting, I think that narrative piece is very important. We do allow for a comment section if providers wish to share. I know Families Moving Forward utilized it this time around for their emergency shelter piece. But then providers will also typically email me after they submit their data, and they'll also let me know if there were things that they noticed. So that's some of the things that I've already shared about like barriers with getting clients into housing that I've shared so far. Is just some of that narrative piece that I've been able to have with the providers.
Okay. Lloyd, I think you're up.
Yeah,
And
thank you, Jonathan. Do we also have a spreadsheet for permanent supportive housing projects, Melissa? That's still being developed.
So that was one of the performance project types that we did not receive performance data for this time around.
Okay.
So I did reach out to all of our providers, and I sent a reminder about, submitting their data, but unfortunately we did not receive any permanent supportive housing data this time around.
Thank you.
Shante?
Shante, yep.
Hey, everybody. I just have a quick comment about and landlord stuff. One of the issues I know that we're running into is the FMRs. And once we kind of include utility payments, our rents are going over FMR, and landlords are not necessarily excited about lowering rents. But that's just another factor, another problem. But more so, my comment is about the data issue that you highlighted for Housing for New Hope. I know the last set of data quality reports that we got, we had a lot of data errors that weren't errors, things that we could find that were actual errors. And so I don't know if that's some of the problem. I mean, I don't know if that was kind of communicated back to in CEH when they send out these data reports, but for some reason, HMIS kept pulling up a lot of missing things, and some of those things were not missing. So I'm not sure if that had a factor in some of those data errors.
That's good to know for context. What I can do, I know like our team has regular meetings with Andrea and others at NCEH, so maybe we can bring that up and see if there's anything that you know, our staff as lead agency can do to help and assist with that process as well.
Thank you.
All right, Daisha has a question or comment.
Yeah, I was just circling back to the last question. So you might, we did several updates to that data quality report. And one of those updates, it was pulling a lot of errors for everybody because originally we wanted all projects to be submitted, to be ran in one report, but it was coming up with a lot of errors because of visibility issues. So the last version that we uploaded to Business Objects, if you run one report at a time, you shouldn't see a bunch of errors in there anymore. So you might want to try that. We did do an updated training on the A20 report. So you might want to try that. And then if errors are still coming up, reach out to us at the data center, and then we could try to troubleshoot it with you.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Well, I will, oh, was somebody about to say something? Okay, one thing that I'm just sort of wondering about, and we just keep coming back to this, is what else we can do to try to get those other organizations to provide their data. I know, Melissa, you've reached out, you know, you're extending, you know, every help, every resource you can from your role. Obviously, I know we'd all like more data. So I'm just kind of wondering at this point, as a committee, if there's something we should or need to do to support Melissa, support the community development department in gathering this data.
As I mentioned in the chat box, I'll follow up with her regarding some of our missing data. I know we just recently pulled a report for our calendar year as well as another time period. And so we'll definitely follow up with you, Melissa, on today with information that's regarding our data in HMIS.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Jonathan. I will say that I know Lloyd and I have had discussions about this as well, because the goal was to be able to, you know, to add this data to our website publicly so that others in the community can review and see how our projects are performing. And sorry. And so I think that we have been talking about just going ahead and reporting the data that we do have, and we would also display you know, the names of the organizations that we haven't, you know, received data from, just for full transparency, and so that people are aware that, you know, the data that we are sharing is not necessarily a complete view of everyone that's within our system, since there are elements missing.
And Lloyd, I think you might have been jumping in too.
Yeah, just to follow up on Melissa's comment, I do think that we can give organizations one more time you know, to submit data and let them know that, after, you know, whether the deadline is August 20th or August 31st or whatever, that we will be publishing publicly on the COC website, the reporting, and we will also be reporting that different projects did not submit data. So kind of one way, hopefully, that we can get, I mean, there probably still will be some organizations that do not submit data, but we can let the community know that they've not submitted, and that it's part of the, from our perspective as the continuum of care, it's part of their obligation as members of the continuum of care to submit data, no matter what their funding sources are as part of their COC.
So a point of clarification, Jonathan, I just wanted to make sure everyone that's in the continuum of care does receive funding or does not receive funding from the city, state, and national.
Yeah, great question. So not everybody in the COC receives funding through one of the funding processes that we have, whether it be the state ESG or the city RFP or the continuum of care competition. So there, for example, simply because my world of expertise is veterans, there are several organizations on the list of folks of organizations that have not submitted data who get their funding through VA grants. But I do know, as having worked for at least one of those organizations and you know, knowing a little bit about those VA grants, is usually that they are required to participate in their local COC. So those organizations will be part of the COC, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get, you know, funding from us. So really, we're asking those organizations out of goodwill, out of cooperation, also as part of the agreement that organizations sign as being part of the COC, that they'll, you know, participate and provide information.
Just wondering if there was a correlation there. You know, there may, if you begin to publicize, you could specify that certain organizations don't receive direct funding, state, local, city, but they're part of the COC and have accepted the requirement to report. And you may want to use a bit of that in the language when you request the information. That might help. Or it might help us to uncover issues as to why they are not able to, or not. Maybe it's not that they aren't willing to, but it could be a staffing issue. Just thinking.
Sure, absolutely. I think it's probably several things. I think probably many of these organizations and many of our own, you know, are, you know, have demands on us that exceed more than, you know, than the time that we have. So I certainly, you know, I know VOA is backed up with referrals, you know, for homeless veterans. So, you know, I can imagine that it might be challenging for them to, you know, get all their data, you know, in order with when you're backed up with referrals. But, you know, that's just, you know, a thought or an assumption on my part there. And yeah, I do think, you know, of course, if you're getting funding from one of these processes, I think, you know, that is a nice little motivator there. I have sent out an email as the chair, just encouraging folks, and you know, and I know Melissa has as well, and extended her, you know, her help. You know, it just would be nice, since these are system measures, you know, we're only catching a small part of the, you know, the system. So, you know, perhaps we just continue to, you know, to offer support and encourage these organizations to submit.
Yeah, and let them know that you're going to actually publicize the information and how valuable that is to the community. So maybe that will help too.
And one of the other things we've tried to emphasize too is occasionally when an organization applies for like an outside grant, you know, something that is not related to any of these three funding cycles, they need like a COC letter, you know, of support. And, you know, it's really great when to be able to provide that letter when we have data to back stuff up and say, yeah, we really, we recommend this and support this organization. They're part of the COC and their data indicates, whatever, that they're successful, so forth. Okay, anything else on this matter, on this item? Okay. Thanks again, Melissa, Lloyd, and your team. And thanks for the great questions here from each of you all. Last item on the agenda is a review of Performance Management Committee responsibilities. And so I hand that back to Lloyd.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think with the start of a new fiscal year, it's kind of the Performance Management's first meeting of the 2023-2024 fiscal year that we operate out of. But it's a good time to review the responsibilities of the Performance Management Committee as they're described in the governance charter of the Durham COC. And so hopefully, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
We can.
Okay, I pulled up the 2019 governance charter, which is the last time the governance charter was amended and updated. So essentially, there's 6 key responsibilities that are described: performance standards and monitoring, which we have been discussing in the last previous item on the agenda. Paragraph B is an area that the committee is not yet doing. It says the Performance Management Committee shall, on at least an annual basis, review, evaluate, and report to the full HSAC on the implementation of the COC written standards for organizational members designated as homeless service providers or funders. As needed based on evaluation findings, the Performance Management Committee will instruct the lead agency on action to address findings and make recommendations to the HSAC on additional necessary action. Paragraph C, outcome evaluation, also relates to the previous agenda item and how we are seeking to evaluate outcomes of all projects that are part of our homeless housing inventory. HMIS implementation. We talked about it some. We're grateful that Daisha Shanks is on the call today to help us with HMIS implementation. Consistent participation of recipients and subrecipients of public funds used to address homelessness. Where we're currently struggling, I would say, is with units at the Durham Housing Authority that do receive public funds and are used to address homelessness by being available for referrals. We're not currently tracking those units and the people who are occupying those units in the HMIS. Emergency housing vouchers and housing choice vouchers are not being tracked in the HMIS. Grant amendments and funding decisions, I think we're doing pretty well on. We haven't had grant amendments, although the LGBTQ Center is considering, I think, requesting an amendment to their 2021 COC grant agreement to extend the 12-month period for expending the grant to a 15 or 18-month period. We're not sure we're going to be able to get that grant agreement an actual copy of it before this committee, before it's submitted to HUD, but we have suggested to the LGBTQ Center that they should be doing that. And certainly funding decisions are being worked through this committee. So I think from our perspective, probably the one major area that the committee is not yet implementing is paragraph B on evaluating implementation of COC written standards. I think, I don't want to speak for Colin and the other members of the homelessness team, but I'm not sure how much bandwidth, if any, there might be within the homeless lead agency, or the COC lead agency, I should say, in the homeless team, to provide additional support for working on an evaluation as described in paragraph B, but we do want to bring it to the attention of the committee. Maybe there's some bandwidth within the committee to work on this.
All right. And so when we're talking about, so we would be looking at evaluating the written standards, how each of these organizations is matching up.
Right, what they're doing to implement the written standards, correct.
Okay. Tracy's got a question.
Yeah, my question was kind of along the same lines of Jonathan's. Are we not still continuing to do, I think it's right now, the biannual performance measure outcome data collection? And I know that's kind of prior to sometimes for the annual COC competition, but I was wondering, is that a part of that, or is that something in addition to that?
I think from my understanding, yeah, we've adopted the outcomes in March of 2022. The HSAC adopted the outcomes that Melissa reviewed performance on in this meeting. We have not really done any kind of review really of how our projects are implementing those COC written standards. We did a update of the written standards in 2022. I think the Policy and Planning Committee is responsible. I'm scrolling up to their responsibility section. I believe they're responsible for establishing the written standards of the committee, or excuse me, of the providers. I think that's covered under under E, under policy development. I believe they may be working on a revision to the written standards. So I mean, it is something that when we have perhaps a revision of the written standards, those can be brought before this committee, and can be some discussion as to how we might wish to implement the written, or evaluate the implementation. I mean, one simple thing might be try to get representatives of the homeless service providers or funders to come to meetings of this committee and report on what they're doing to implement the written standards. Could also perhaps design a survey based on the written standards and ask people to complete the survey. Those might be a couple of options that would require less work outside the meetings of the committee.
Are the written standards, do they go by another name? I'm just looking to see if they are published on the COC website.
Melissa,
I see coordinated
that
entry,
question?
data standards, program standards, ranking and evaluation.
probably under program standards.
Okay.
Find them.
Or was this a question for me? I'm sorry.
The question of how our written standards are referred to on the COC website.
So on the CO, are you asking like where can they be found on the website?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So there's a policy section on our COC website. I can link it here. Let me grab that. So on the website, they're listed as like COC policies, procedures, and standards. And then once someone clicks on that link, they'll have access to the governance charter, the HSAC interlocal agreement. Our annual reports are also available there. But all of our standards and policies are listed on that site.
I'm just trying to get the sense if we're looking at like one set of standards, or if there's multiple policies that fall under the title of written standards. I'm sort of trying to get an idea of the scope of what this might entail.
On the website, Jonathan, they're listed under continuum of care standards. And it's a longer document of 33 pages that describes them and sets expectations for how programs and projects will operate.
Lord, this particular page, the particular page you were showing us previously, what page is that on the standards? Because I'm going down through it,
Okay,
the requirements.
Yeah, on the policies, procedures, and standards, what I had shared my screen on is language included in the first document, the COC governance charter.
Oh, the governance chart. Okay.
And if you open that, let's see, it's down on page
13. No,
page 4 and 5
4 and 5.
of the governance charter.
I see it. Okay.
I think I would need to spend a little bit of time reviewing these
Sure.
before I could give any sort of thought.
Well,
And I mean, it's also good to know kind of where you all stand as staff. I mean, you know, as far as bandwidth. So I need to review them before I could kind of give any sort of thought from my own end as chair as to what this might possibly look
Sure.
like.
we just wanted to start the conversation today.
Yeah. So perhaps for the next meeting, we could revisit this. And I'm not saying we have to stop right now, although we have 8 minutes left, but I certainly would want to maybe bring this up again, maybe in the next meeting, so I could at least, you know, as a individual member and chair, give you some thoughts. Does anybody else have any questions about this for Lloyd and the team?
I would agree, Jonathan, to, we don't have to conclude the discussion now, but maybe possibly spend some more time at our next meeting, kind of delving into this and how this would actually be carried out through, you know, us as a subcommittee and working with the other agencies to get it done and what that would look like. What do we actually, you know, as the, I don't know if we're going to be the depository of that information or what is the likely outcome of what we're trying to get at? I guess just so we're clear on, as you mentioned, Jonathan, like the scope of what's being asked of us regarding the implementation evaluation.
And part of this too for me would also be like, are we collecting qualitative data? Is it more quantitative? I mean, I think that makes a difference a little bit in terms of what has to be done to collect it. So yeah, we'll bring this up in the next meeting as well.
And I don't know, Lloyd, this is the last time you guys are hearing me say I'm the new kid on the block, right? But because we all have contract monitors, I'm wondering if this is something that can be monitored ongoingly as assistance is provided or as we conduct site visits. So I don't know, but I certainly will take another look and get with the team and see if that makes sense to try to incorporate this in any way into ongoing work.
Okay. Well, I would certainly encourage everybody to review the standards before the next meeting, and then that way, maybe, that way we all have a chance to review them and we can revisit this topic and see if this is something that the group wants to do. The other thing too is I know we're kind of getting close to that transition time of the year where we're going to have a new chair of HSAC. The new chair selects the new subcommittee chairs. So, I think some of that will also depend on, what the goals are of whoever the chair is going to be, going forward. But I think it is absolutely worth reviewing and coming back to. Well, we are just about at time. Are there any final comments, concerns, questions?
I would like to say that the reporting is always excellent. And I appreciate that, very detailed. And welcome to Mr. Henderson.
Thank you.
And I'm Ruby's mother as well.
I think I sit next to somebody you know.
Tell my baby I said, hey.
I will.
All right.
And we need
Thank you so
more
much.
new kids on the block. So
Right.
we need more new blood. All right. Well, thank you everybody for a very good meeting here and for your comments and questions. Unless there's nothing further, I'm happy to entertain a motion to adjourn for today.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Who was the second there? Was that
Angela.
Okay. We have a motion to adjourn by Renee, seconded by Angela. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And we'll see you all at the HSAC meeting. We are adjourned.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Y'all take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.